Good morning, Nicole. Yay. Good morning, Tay. Cute picture. Let's see. Good morning. All right, got share. Kaylin, not yet. Oh, yay. Tay. No, Stephanie yet. Jamie. Elizabeth, Stephanie. Alex came in. And no Philip yet. Okay. Orion, can you turn on your camera real quick and say hi? I didn't get to talk with you last week.
Oh, sorry about that. Let me see if I've got something lying around. Oh, come on. Camera. Should be good here. Just a sec.
That's okay. Elizabeth is rocking out. I want to know what she's listening to.
I just had some of these for the first time. I worked out this morning, so I was like, I need something to give me a little power. And I took a bite, my first bite, and I was like, you know, this is actually pretty good.
That's good. Yeah, I'm doing my workout afterwards because because this is 8:30, and so it's kind of tricky to like make it work for me. And I also work out with a friend. She's in Canada, so we like Zoom together, but her kids are like going off to school in the morning. So it's like, and they're actually going to school. Like she's been freaking out. But she's like, you will wear your visor and your mask and the whole thing. Like, so yeah, she's in Quebec. So it's a little different there for them. But yeah, so yay, good for you. All right.
I'll have
So
to check the
Orion, can
physics
you
of this.
hop on now? And we all kind of introduced ourselves last week, just kind of who we are, if we are a student or a continuing education student or a gen ed student, what our major is, and then any experience or exposure with dance before.
Okay. Unfortunately for the video, I might need to like restart my computer since this is
That's all
just like
right.
a plug and play thing. But for
I
me,
don't know why in
I'm
this
Orion
class
Cheney,
everybody likes to show it.
doing
Rally classes, we don't.
pre-med. I like,
good.
I mean, my father was a singer and a dancer and a performer before, but I'm mostly doing more, medical stuff.
Very cool. So you've been exposed to it, you just don't, personally, it's not kind of where
Not,
you...
yeah, not normally my thing. I'm more drawn to drawing.
Oh, drawing and medical. That's really exciting. What, do you hope to merge those?
Uh, Mostly I do the drawing on the side as my own thing for like comics and stuff. But I'm mostly looking at maybe that could be a side thing, but for medical that would be my main income, hopefully.
Well, I know I had one student at one point who really enjoyed writing and was also in medical. And he was interested in trying to, I think it was like write, like basically medical movies, medical like stories. I think he was saying more like books and stuff like that, but like that he'd hoped would become movies, sort of like the legal dramas and stuff like that, but he wanted to do like medical dramas. And I thought that was really kind of creative because he liked writing, but he was also very interested in the medical field. So he actually wanted to have his MD and do this on the side too. So I always think it's so amazing. You guys always have multiple talents and the way you merge them is so brilliant. So it's pretty cool. Well, great. Yay, hello. Good morning.
All right. I'm going to see if I can get this camera working. I'll be back in a sec.
It's okay. I like to be able to put faces because I don't actually get to physically see you guys. So it's always kind of nice to sort of have a face that goes with it. And then ultimately, when we are like, probably not today, but maybe today, that'd be awesome. As we kind of continue on, it's always good to be able to see everybody because we're going to try and have this be more of a conversation. So the way that I'm kind of structuring this class is that these meetings will actually be a chance to kind of talk about the material that we watched between the meetings. So that's kind of our goal. So yeah, if you want to hop out and see if you can get the camera working, great. Otherwise, you're good for today, and it's great to get to meet you.
All right. Yeah, I'll see if I can get this done as quickly as I can.
Cool.
Alrighty.
And Nicole, I totally understand. My kids are here, and they're going to be here. We went ahead and said the first 9 weeks, just because I'm nervous and I want them to stay healthy and I want their friends to stay healthy. So, and I'm here, so I don't need them to go. But socially, I think my daughter is like dying because she loves being around all her friends. So I'm sure it sounds like your son really wants to get back with all of his friends too. I know my son does too, but my daughter's the one who's more like more freaking out about it. Cool. All right. And it looks like I
Put
got
your phone right here.
most everybody else.
No.
Let's see. Go ahead and do this. Like, oh, like Travis. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Well, you know, honestly, I don't blame them because I think a lot of the high school teachers were older or have been historically a little bit older, and you know, controlling a bunch of kindergartners is one thing, controlling a bunch of high schoolers is a completely different thing. So yeah, I don't blame them at all. Did I get Michaelan? Did I see you come in? No. Okay. And I know I got Stephanie, and I know I got Jamie, and I got my other Stephanie, and I got Philip. Yeah, okay, so just Michaelan is the only one I'm missing. Okay, and I know Orion's coming back in. All right, so here we go. I got a couple of things I want to talk you guys through a little bit, and then we'll kind of start talking about India. So first of all, I made a couple of changes, and I am more than happy to kind of add other things if there's other things that you guys can think of that would be helpful. So on Blackboard, I went ahead and I put our Zoom link over here on the left-hand side so that you can easily get to it as soon as you kind of log on. I also pinned the announcement up to the top, so you always have that link as well. And just to sort of reinforce, we are meeting every Wednesday. The only Wednesday we are not officially meeting is the Wednesday of Thanksgiving, because it's the Wednesday of Thanksgiving. So that will officially be office hours. So if you do log on because you're really good and you're here every Wednesday, I'll be there and I'll say hi, happy Thanksgiving, and you can ask me questions. I've also got posted up here, this was for today, right, that you're watching lecture 1 and 2 and reading the chapter. And then afterwards you have lecture 3, and you also have the Bharatanatyam dance lab. I have it posted now. So I will move this up to be above chapter 2 or week 2 after this. And the things I want to kind of point out here, I went ahead and I put our Bharatanatyam lab on YouTube so it downloads a little bit easier for you guys. Please make sure that you keep this as our link. Don't go sharing it around or whatnot, because I want to maintain kind of the integrity of our work. And this is something that, you know, was done for us. So that is our private link. After you have watched that one and you have done the lab and all of that fun stuff, we will have our meeting next week where we will talk more about Bollywood and Kathakali and also your experience giving this a try. You can see me in the little video giving my try. And then after that, so not this week, this is for next week. After that will be your first unit quiz and paper. So each of our weeks is always, or each of our units, I'm sorry, is always 2 weeks. So please don't feel rushed, right? This is our very first time of kind of having our conversation about the material that we've looked at. Then the other thing I want to sort of bring your attention to is we were having trouble downloading there she is. We were having trouble downloading the lecture files. You can go down here, and I have now added the YouTube links to this item, which also has the audio only files. I actually had the YouTube links for these already put up in the joint one for them, but I went ahead and popped it out so that you could see it and click on it a lot faster and a lot easier. So it's broken up the same way. So here is our introduction one. Here is Bharatanatyam and Kathak. And then here is Kathakali in Bollywood. So if that's easier for you, which I think for most of us it is, you can go ahead and just click on those links and that will help you get in. The next thing is here is the link for your quiz and to submit your paper along with the prompt and more information on that. And again, ask me any questions, right? It's not until next week, but feel free to ask me any questions if you've already started working on it. And then here is our Bharatanatyam lab. This is the file itself, and then this is the YouTube link again. So between this one, or if you clicked on the one in the announcements, you should be able to have access to it or be able to gain access to it. Do you guys have any other kind of requests or things that you think might be helpful? Yes, Elizabeth already does. Perfect. Okay, so Elizabeth, go.
So I had a question about the labs. So for example, we did the lab last week. It was the stretches, the movement, really great, and like, for for just doing every day. I just had a question for lab expectations. Do we need to record ourselves to kind of get that credit? So I wanted to start there because I wasn't sure what the expectations were for that.
Great question. So if you remember back, oh no, Stephanie's out. There we go. When I was walking through our syllabus, I mentioned, yay, she's back. I mentioned replacement credit. And that is actually where the labs kind of come into play. So my preference is that you go ahead and you experience the labs with each unit so that you have something to talk about here in this space. And we can kind of share that information. And if you haven't experienced it, you won't necessarily be able to share it. But for those of us who are not dancers, and I love the fact that we do have a number of dancers in our group. So, you know, if Philip and Tay want to get together and do like a little Zoom duo of them doing their, you know, Bharatanatyam together or whatever, awesome. But you don't have to, right? So I'm trying to make this as accessible and also as sort of personal as you want it to be. So if you're like, I'm gonna like try and do it at like 10 o'clock at night when my house is sort of quiet, great, right? And no one else ever needs to see it. But if you want to, you can go ahead and record yourself doing some of the experience. There's usually a phrase. So in the case of our Bharatanatyam one, you could record yourself doing Mary Had a Little Lamb with our hand gestures. It's a little ram. I think I've got it right. There you go. And that can be, and you can record yourself doing that, and then that would be replacement credit for either a quiz or a paper. So if you're like, oh man, that 1 week is, I avoid show week on purpose, but pretend it's show week. That 1 week is show week, and I know that nothing is happening between Friday and Sunday. Like it's not happening, right? You can go ahead and record one of your experiences and send that to me, and I will count that as credit for the paper or the quiz that you missed. So yeah, so is there anything that is required to do with the labs? No. You can kind of treat it as one of the lectures. It's part of the experience of the course. Can you do something with them? Absolutely. You can go ahead and record yourself doing them, and I will accept that as replacement credit for one or the other of those assignments. Remember, it does not replace your final paper or your presentation. So those you gotta do. And as a part of those, if you wanted to, you know, maybe you're very crafty and you wanted to put together a compilation of your little videos you made of all of your dance experiences. I know it's a little controversial right now, but say you made a TikTok of all of your dance lab experiences. I like TikTok. I'm sorry if that makes me a bad person. I think it's fun. You can put together those experiences, send me that little video, and you know, that would be a great like start to your, yay, there he is, cool.
Right, we're good.
It's good to see you. Hi.
Hello.
Everybody, this is Orion. I think I'm pronouncing it right, yeah?
Yes.
Good. So you can always send that to me, or you can have that be like the introduction of your presentation. So that would be a great way of like introducing yourself, all of these cultures you've been exposed to, and now you're going to share with us this culture, right? So that's kind of another way that you can use it. So be creative, have fun, but if you are the type of person who's like, I'm going to do it in the dark so I can't even see what I'm doing, that's totally fine. Yeah, cool, good question. And you're addicted. Yeah, me too, it's fun. There's so many good dance ones, like that's the thing, like that's what I enjoy about it, as opposed to kind of other social media kinds of things where it's like every now and then it's dance, it's like dance. Other questions or things that you guys think might be helpful?
Is it possible to get, like, right now we're on the India chapter. Is it possible to get the next one as well as to start looking at?
Yes. So the next chapter, the next one actually releases, it's the Zar Sema, and I think it releases today.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So that you can jump into it. Now, my only thing, that's interesting. My only thing with that is to make sure that you have finished. Let me, there. To make sure that you have finished with India. So I want you guys to be able to process one unit before moving on to the next. So if you have already kind of processed and you feel really comfortable with it and you're ready to move on, Alex, you absolutely may. I would probably make sure to knock out like the little quiz so that the material doesn't start to get sort of jumbled, but hopefully the quizzes are what help to keep the material from getting jumbled, kind of reinforcing these are the key points of this one, and then, okay, these are the key points of this one. So that's my only sort of request. And then they will always release a couple of days, or usually it's a week before the next one. So you can kind of finish up material and then start into the next material. But if you're kind of listening to me as like a podcast and you're like, okay, what happens next? Then I totally get it. So, because I binge podcasts all the time. It's kind of,
I had a question, if you don't
Yeah.
mind.
Go for it.
So for the tests, for like each segment, are we gonna have multiple chances to take the test, or is it like one chance if you like? Are they fairly easy, or like, I don't know. That's what I'm like a little concerned about, is like the test, and then the essay as well. Like I saw that there were like questions for the essay. Do you just want us to touch base on all those questions and just make it like a 2-page essay, right? That's what you want for the papers, 2 pages?
Yes, basically. So let me share out to kind of show you guys. So first of all, for your first question, yes, you can take the quiz. At the little unit quiz, you can take it 3 times. So you can take and submit it multiple times, and it has very sort of straightforward questions. They are all multiple choice, multiple answer. Some are multiple answers, similar to our little quiz on the syllabus. And then also there are true false. So This is the India unit quiz kind of intro. You have to have taken it by midnight on the 11th, but you know, as soon as we're done with class next week, you can just go ahead and knock it out. You could even try it today after class, knowing that you can take it again twice, right? So it's kind of up to you when you want to take it. You can stop and resume later. So you can start part of the test, and then if you're like, oh, I don't know the answer to that one, you can save it and then come back to it like next week. And again, you can take it multiple times. I will basically touch base with you as soon as I see that you have attempted it in the grade book. So if you attempted it in the grade book, it will actually give me a little circle if you are in the process of doing it, meaning you haven't officially submitted it yet. And it will give me a grade if you have finished it. So say you take it and the first time through you get an 80. I see that grade and I can basically write back to you like, hey, don't forget, you can take it again. You're good. So I will always kind of respond back to you to make sure that you understand that you can do it again, that it's, you know, it's about kind of learning and reinforcing what we've gone over. So how easy is it? Okay, so it's material that I'm now more versed in. This is still a fairly young class. I fought for it for about 2.5 years, along with my chair of my department. I was like, we need a world dance class. And she's like, all right, I'll go to the mat for you. I love Catherine, she's awesome. And yeah, and so 2 years ago fall, so you guys are now my second anniversary. Yay! I finally got the course through. Yay! Thank you, Alex. Yeah, I'm really happy. This is my baby. I love this course. It's so much fun. Like, I love getting to explore all these cultures and always adding more. It's so cool. So personally, I think that the questions, I try to craft the questions to be really straightforward. I try not to have them be confusing at all, because that's not helpful. So personally, I think that it's a very simple quiz, but you may disagree. so you know, after this first one, Stephanie, if you want to like PM me and be like, that sucked, that was awful, then I'll be like, all right, here's what we can do to kind of work on them for the next ones. Or you can be like, oh, okay, I got it, I can breathe. It's okay. So that's, you know, that's kind of the idea behind the quiz. Now, the little paper, or what you kind of call the essay, which I kind of get, right? It is kind of like the essay response to your kind of quiz, right? These are all going to be individual. So I have prompts for them. Go back here. And each paper has its own prompt. So the India unit paper has its own, yeah, okay, it's small on here because it's the thing, has its own prompt. And the prompt for this one is to discuss and describe the movements in Indian dance, right? From the videos that we watch, from the experience that you have in the dance lab, and how they differ from dance styles with which I am familiar. So say that you have been dancing ballet and jazz and tap all your life, then this is going to be something that is either really easy, because you'll be like halfway through one thought and 2 pages will be done. I will keep reading, so if you go further, that's totally fine. Or it's going to be really challenging, because you're like, well, it's different like this and this and this and this and this and this, and you're like, where do I even start? So it could be more challenging if you have experience. And then likewise on the flip side, if all you have ever done is you have watched people dance at your cousin's wedding, well, how does it look different from the people dancing at your cousin's wedding? In large part, a lot of these are more sort of solo performance, except for when we talk about Bollywood, which if your cousin's wedding was Bollywood, awesome. I want to be a part of your family. So you can kind of talk about how a lot of social dances in the United States tend to be more couple dancing, or dancing that's done as a group, maybe line dancing. And the traditions of Bharatanatyam and Kathak are more individual dancing and portraying a character or telling a story. And that is very different from the bride and groom dancing together at a wedding. So my hope is that whatever level of experience you have, you can kind of write about what you see as similar and what you see as different in these dance styles. For somebody who has grown up around the arts and seen a lot, you might already be able to say like, well, so I'm very familiar with classical Indian dance, and I see a lot of differences in the way the feet are held and the way the arms are held, and you can be really specific. But don't be afraid if you can't, right? If you're like, well, the costumes are different, great, right? The costumes are showing off the movement in a different way, and you haven't seen costumes like that before. That's a great kind of entry point into writing about this. So Stephanie, I know you just kind of clicked out there for a moment, but does that make you feel a little bit more comfortable about both of those?
Yes, thank you so much. You answered all the questions.
Okay. And don't forget, I'm always happy to see a draft. So even though it's a 2-page paper, I'm totally happy if you're like, I just have a paragraph and I'm not sure if I'm going the right direction. More than happy, send it to me in an email and I will kind of let you know where you're at.
All right, thank you. No, it's just writing isn't really like my thing. I thought when I finished both my composition classes, my English classes, I was done. But I see that I'm not, because a lot of the classes I'm taking now like require like 7-page essays, 2-page essays, and I'm like, oh, like it's very much of a drag for me. So I'm like,
yeah. Well, I guess I would hope that you can think of this one as maybe almost more of like a journal entry. So I am not going to be nitpicking on grammar or spelling. You know, ideally I can understand what you're saying, but I'm not gonna like attack any of that. I'm looking for content. So if you want to write more as like, you know, thought flow, like a journal kind of response, I'm okay with that. And that goes for everybody, right?
okay,
If you
thank you.
because again, these are sort of more journal type prompts, right? What differences do you see? What similarities do you see? So that's not necessarily a thesis statement with 3 supporting paragraphs and conclusion. You can do that. You can absolutely do that if you want. If that's your happy place, go for it. If you want to kind of go more thought flow, Alex is like, yes, that's my happy place. Then that's great. So yeah. So don't let it scare you. And again, I'm happy to take a look at drafts. I think this is probably a concern for a lot of us too, right? Because anyone else? If English is not your first language, write in your language. Write in the language that is most natural to you, because that is actually your voice. And then after that, switch it over to English. So start in your native language if English is not your first language, and then convert over into English afterwards, so that you've got your ideas there in the voice that you feel most comfortable. Because I know I've had students in the past who have really struggled, and it's been in part because they don't know how to express themselves in English. And I'm like, no. Use your language and then switch it over. Because unless you're writing in French, I don't know it. Because French is the one I studied, because of course, hello ballet and lots of history and stuff. So Yeah, so that's the one that I can read. Other questions on quizzes, papers, anything that would be helpful to have additional elements? Pretty cool. Other than like DoorDash delivering coffee and donuts, I'm okay. That would be awesome if they did. I'd be like, hey. All right. So I'm going to jump in now to kind of talking about our India unit. And what I would really like to have happen is I would love to have this be more of a discussion. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, I'm going to leave the subtitles on. So I would really like to have kind of your feedback and the things that you guys would like to take a deeper look at. For this section, we actually started with our introduction. So I started with kind of introducing you guys to kind of the main ideas and elements of India, right? There's a reason that I like to start with India, because India, its location is right in the middle of everything. And for the longest time, it was right in the middle of what was called the known world, because hello, we didn't really exist over here. So India was right in the middle of everything. And it looks very different from how it did historically. Historically, it actually took this entire plain right here below the mountain range, which is currently Tibet, also known as China. And we actually had this area over here, which is now modern Pakistan and part of Afghanistan. So this was all considered to be India for a very long time. And they extended all the way over here. These are now separate countries as well, but they did extend, or the range of India extended all the way over here. And then you can take a look at the coastline, right? So this is a huge coastline that borders Africa, the African continent, as well as the Pacific Islands. And so India is very unique in being able to be an easy trading partner, both east and west. So over here to the east with all the islands, and over here to the west with what we call the Middle East and the continent of Africa. It, of course, was also a big part of the trade routes from China into, actually, let me go back out again, sorry, into Europe. So the trade routes would come right down here because it was easier to pass under the mountains than to try and go over them. So the trade routes would come down through India, over through Turkey, and into the European route area. So there's a lot of Indian culture that is seen in many, many, many of the other countries that we are going to be looking at. So you can see Indian influences in the Pacific Islands when we get to talk about them, in particular Bali. There are Indian influences when we come over here and we talk about Spain with flamenco. There's actually this great research that's currently being done that sees a lot of connection between Kathak, which is the storytelling dance, which came from sort of the northern part of India, and the flamenco kind of use of rhythm performed currently in Spain. So there's a lot of interconnectedness with India, which is in part why I like to start with it. So India is kind of like our center, and then we're going to follow circles that go beyond it. Contemporarily, this is what India looks like now. And again, I know all of this is in the lecture that you saw before, but just kind of reiterating it. So Bangladesh and Myanmar or Burma are new countries that are in an area that used to be occupied by what was called India. And the biggest thing to kind of remember about India is that it is broken up into many states, just like the USA is. And just like the USA, we have different cultures in different states. So if you had a friend who was visiting you from Maine, they are going to have a very different culture than you are. And they probably own a lot more sweaters than you do. I like sweaters, but I really don't get to wear them very much. It's mainly like February. Otherwise, I spend most of my time in, sleeveless stuff or short sleeves. And that's kind of more our culture. So our clothing is different. Also, people who are from Maine have more access to like fresh seafood. I love lobster. Forgive me if you are a veggie or a vegan. I love lobster. It's so good. And that's something that they have easy access to, which we don't down here in Texas. But likewise, if I were to go visit a friend up in Maine, I would probably not go looking for a barbecue place because they're probably not going to have anything close to Texas barbecue. So there's a very different kind of food culture as well. And then kind of on the philosophical sort of approach and whatnot, Texas is very proud of the fact that within its constitution, it can claim independence at any point in time. Also, for a very short period of time, it was its own country. So the mentality of Texas is this very sort of big, grand, sweeping space that has a very strong independent streak. Maine is also very independent, but in a different way. They have a very long history of interaction with the Native Americans and with the Canadians. So there were many skirmishes and battles that were fought in and around Maine, and it's very, very wooded up in Maine. So you have the coastline and then you have woods. And so it's a very different environment and a very different mentality. The people who live up there are much more accustomed to snow and to kind of bringing things together to keep life happening, even in the dead of winter, or from attacks from either the new population, right? The Europeans who came in and like decided that they own this land, or from the indigenous population who, keep kind of raiding in because you have taken their food source. So there's a very different mentality in Maine than there is in Texas. So those are just 3 cultural differences in the United States. And you can look at any other state and kind of do the same sort of comparison. You can look at California to Texas. You can look at Iowa to Texas, right? All of these different states have different personalities, and the people who live in them tend to have different sort of cultural elements or things that they like. The same thing is very, very true for India. So over here on the more eastern portion, this is actually all still India. There's a little connection right here between Bangladesh and Nepal. And this area over here has very different dance styles that actually have a more Asian or Chinese influence, versus up here in the area of Kashmir, which is currently a disputed region. So that's a whole nother political discussion. And this area also used to include Pakistan until about 60 years ago. Literally overnight, Pakistan was part of India, and then they decided at midnight that Pakistan was going to become its own country, and the line of demarcation was established. And so all of these northern kind of western areas have a different culture. They are more likely to be Muslim, they are more likely to be interested in storytelling and not as likely to be inclusive of jewelry and flowers the way that other areas of India are. And then down south here, when we are looking at Bharatanatyam and Kathakali, so Bharatanatyam comes over here from Tamil Nadu. Again, forgive my pronunciation. And over here, where Kathakali is going to come from, this is a very heavily Hindu populated area. This is the area where my Bharatanatyam dancers were my temple dancers, and they performed in the temples of to the Hindu gods. And my Kathakali were warriors for the lords of the various lands throughout their region. And when they were not battling other warriors for other lords, they would entertain the Lord by putting on a production, right? Basically, it was like the way for the guys to sort of blow off steam. They couldn't go watch television, so they got together and basically put on a play. It gives the Lord entertainment. It also gives the Lord a reason to keep paying them. Yay! So that's what they did. Another thing that I kind of mentioned before is religion. So the area of kind of, I'll say historical India was really sort of broken into two religions. We had you were more likely to be Muslim or follow the Muslim faith if you were from the northern and western areas. And then you were more likely to follow the Hindu faith if you were from the southern and eastern areas. In fact, the Far East was also likely to be Buddhist. So we actually had three religions. However, Buddhism has unfortunately basically been stamped out within the area that we're looking at for modern day India. And India, the sort of southern portion of India really shared the Hindu philosophy with a number of areas around it. So that is why you can see a heavily influenced Hindu population in the Pacific Islands and also over in the continent of Africa. The Muslim population was predominantly this northern area where you would have lords of various tribal lands traveling, and they would travel with their court, and they would also share kind of their faith and their culture with people in the surrounding area. So we actually have a large Muslim population that of course extends into China because of the trade routes, and then into what we call the Middle East. And so all of this area was predominantly Muslim, and that is in large part why Pakistan ended up breaking away from India. As India, after the British leave, and we'll talk about them here in just a moment, as India becomes more sort of Hindu-centric, they don't officially have a national religion. However, Hinduism is definitely the preferred religion and the religious, I'll say, support of a lot of their doctrines. Pakistan was predominantly Muslim and decided that they wanted to be on their own. They did not want to be a part of India anymore. And so they broke away. Then the third religion, which I just kind of mentioned, if you picked up on it, is Christianity. And that one came in with the British. So let me come back. I'll come back to, there we go. The British actually started to trade with India very early on. There were often these overland trade routes with India, again, given its location. And India was the primary source of tea for the British. And yes, it is kind of a joke, but it's also pretty accurate that the British love their tea. And so in order to find a better route to get their tea, Columbus, yes, I know it was through Spain and da-da-da-da, but Columbus was actually looking for a trade route with India when he landed in the West Indies, aka the Caribbean. And so it was actually looking for a connection to India that the New World was discovered by Europeans, because of course our native population had been here forever. We then have the British East India Trading Company, which ultimately kind of establishes a foothold in India. And they actually sail usually around the tip of Africa. So we found our trade route along south, below South Africa up into India. We do still, of course, have the overland trade route, but then I've got to deal with all these other people where it's much easier to just have my own ship. It goes down and around to India and comes all the way back. So that was definitely their preferred route. However, that wasn't even enough, because ultimately they decided they didn't like having to take care of paying all of these taxes and whatnot. And so they kind of very gently took over the country in 1858. And I mean gentle in like moving sort of slowly, not necessarily nonviolent. Because in 1858, there was an Indian rebellion. Now this is a little confusing, but the native population of India was rebelling against their perceived the control that was being exerted by the British, right? So the native population is saying, hey, the British have way too much influence over our Raja, or our king. And England decides to solve this problem by saying, oh, okay, well, we'll just come in and we'll completely take over your country then. What? It's basically the response of, you are having an uprising to raise awareness that you would like your independence, and so we're going to come in, and to keep you from being violent uprisers, we are going to completely squash your independence and take over your country. When they do this, they bring in the religion and culture of England. So they now have the Christian faith starting to supplant the Hindu faith. And a large part of that is actually aimed at the Bharatanatyam dancers, who again were dancers in the Hindu temples. And so in 1892, they launched this anti-nautch campaign. Nautch is basically like street performer or street walker, aka prostitute. And these are women who would dance on the street for money. This was not uncommon, it did happen, but the British very conveniently lumped in with this population the Bharatanatyam dancers in the south and the Kathak dancers in the north. Interestingly, they did not touch the Kathakali dancers, who were all male, also in the south. They were warriors for their various lords, so I guess they were okay. I don't know. Basically, this campaign reduced the Kathak and Bharatanatyam dancers from their more elevated status to being that of a streetwalker or prostitute. They couched this, and I like how your book really explains it, as, you know, liberating them from the system that they were a part of, and now they were free to get married. Well, getting married in both the British and Indian system means that basically any property or wealth that is owned by the woman goes to the husband. So that was not always such a great thing, especially for women who had been independent and had owned their own property and their own wealth. Ultimately, in 1947, India gained its independence from England, so not that long ago. Some of your parents may have even been alive when this happened, or at least your grandparents probably were. And so India has been independent for a while, but that is in part why it still kind of has the struggles like it did with Pakistan about sort of establishing their rules and laws and expectations. And that's kind of what we're seeing today with Kashmir thinking about breaking away as well. So let me go back here and talk a little bit about the Natya Shastra, because this is a word that you probably saw a lot and that you're going to hear a lot. And this is basically a text or a book. You can think of it as a book. And it was given by the god, one of the gods, to the scholar Bharatna Muni. Yeah, again, sorry for my pronunciation. And he then wrote down all of this wisdom. And this wisdom is not just kind of more stories like the Christian Bible is, but it's also kind of a way of living and celebrating within the Hindu faith. So we have expressions, we have technique, we have specific steps, we have all of the hand gestures, we have postures. We can go to this to find out what makeup to wear, what jewelry to wear, what costuming to wear, what colors to wear. All of these elements are included in this book, the Natya Shastra. Also in here, though, are various other art forms. So various other forms of music and visual art and ceramics and even rug weaving. So all of these things, the colors, the ideas are all included in the Natya Shastra. So this is a very important text to the population of India. And the last kind of thing before we jump into a little bit more of what the movement looks like is the caste system. Did any of you guys kind of have issues with understanding the caste system? Does it kind of make sense? It's very different from anything we have in the United States. Okay, I think we were all okay. So a big thing that I want to make sure to point out is that it was officially outlawed in 1950. But again, it's still very much a part of the mentality, very much a part of the ideas of the population. I was saying that for us, you know, maybe your parents were born, but probably your grandparents were around then. So if you think about that, the grandparents in India were around then. They remember when the caste system was very definitely a part of life. And so just completely eliminating it takes many generations. So thus, there are generations living that still very much adhere to the caste system because that is what they were brought up in. So the caste system has the priests and actually teachers and doctors are kind of up at the very top here. The priests are at the very, very top. And then teachers and doctors are kind of the top of this second caste. This is also where we find our Kathak dancers. We also have our Kathakali dancers in here because they're warriors. The reason that teachers and doctors and warriors, basically leaders of any kind or people who are passing on knowledge of any kind, the reason that they have to be from this uppermost caste is because they cannot give orders or treat or teach anyone who is from a caste that is higher than they are. That means that I cannot come from the Shudra caste and become a teacher because I would potentially be teaching children of merchants or traders. And thus, I would not be acceptable because I am of a lower caste. So only the people within these castes would be elevated to these leadership or medical or teaching professions. That means that whatever caste you are born into, this is based on the Hindu religion, whatever caste you are born into, you strive to do your best so that when you are born again in your next life, you will move up to the next caste. And of course, your ideal is to be at the very, very top. Outcasts do not exist. If you are born into the outcast, you are literally without caste. You are considered to be untouchable. I had a great example one time that if you are an outcast and you go to buy a pen at a store, again, this is supposedly no longer exists, but this was how it was in like the 1940s. You want to buy a pen, you would actually, let me make sure you guys can see me. I think you can. Okay. You would actually go to the counter. You would put down your money and the object that you wanted. The person at the counter, when they saw you approaching, would have walked and turned away. You're an outcast. You don't exist, right? Then they will turn back. You have to then, you set down your items. You backed up. This person will come back and, oh, a ghost wants to buy a pen, right? I will figure out your change or whatnot and leave your change and the pen there, and I will again turn and go over here. You then come back, you pick up your change and your item, and you leave. So they don't have any interaction if you are of the lowest caste. That's how it traditionally was. And I say traditionally because, to a certain extent, it does still exist. There's an older movie now called Slumdog Millionaire, where you can see that even though the caste system officially doesn't exist, he is still treated as an outcast. He is still treated as an untouchable. And the only options that are open to his family and his friends are very, very limited because they are still seen as being of this lower caste. And again, in the Hindu religion, if you are born into the outcast, it means that you did something horrible in your previous life, and this is your punishment for it, right? So that's where that idea comes from. And Alex, yes, to a certain extent, yeah, with our poverty and the issues that we are currently dealing with as far as racial injustice, absolutely, we do kind of have that sort of system in the United States. And yeah, we can talk about that if you want. And yeah, and Nicole agrees. I do too. We don't have the religious belief that you were born into it, but we do seem to have almost this kind of philosophy within the United States. We have the philosophy of, you guys have all heard, you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? But have you guys ever done the, I'm not sure, I think it's a psychology activity. I like to do this actually in person when we can, but we can't right now. But I'll try and send you an example of it. Basically, you have everyone in the room stand on one line, right? So take all of us. We all stand on one line, okay? Now, you can kind of visualize, pretend with me, yeah? Now, at the other side of the room, or let's say about 10 feet away from you, is the finish line, okay? We're all gonna run a race. So here's the line that we're starting on. About 10 feet away is the finish line. Now, from this line, if you are female or identify as female, take a step backwards. If you grew up in a family that only had one caretaker or did not have any caretakers really, take another step back. If you identify as being gay, lesbian, homosexual, transgender, or bi, take a step back. If you are any race other than white, or what is identified or defined as white, take a step back. Okay, so now probably not many of us are still on that line. Ready? We're gonna run our race. Yeah. So that's a really, yes, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna share that with everybody. Cool. Actually, you guys can all see it, so thank you, yes. So, and that's not even it, right? We can go on. There's a number of different kind of factors, right? If you ever felt food insecure, you take another step back. If you, trying to remember what all they are, but I mean, basically there are so many different factors. Yay, thank you. There are so many different factors to where you start that sometimes the concept of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, right? I can pull myself up by my bootstraps. I'm still only going to be on that line, and other people have already reached the finish. And that's kind of the argument that procedure kind of makes, right? It's identifying that people move through life in a different way because of where they start. And so that's kind of where that exercise comes from. So I like to do that in person because it's really revealing for people to kind of go, oh man, like usually I only have maybe 1 or 2 people who actually get to stay on the line. Maybe, predominantly not. Yeah. So let's see. Since the cast is supposed to be no more people able to, okay, yes. So I can't. Who wrote that? Who asked? Nicole. Okay, cool. Oh, there you are. So yes, the Prime Minister of India before the current one was actually originally from the lowest caste above the outcasts. So he actually was from that lower one. And so that does show you, you know, just in kind of a generation or so, they were able to push beyond that. So India now has more of a system, I would argue, that's probably very similar to ours, where again, if you start off in an outcast family, yes, you can make it to being on the game show. You can make it to winning $1 million, but it's a much greater struggle than for somebody whose family already is fairly affluent, already has a lot to kind of work with. I have a very good friend who is from India. She was actually an exchange student in elementary school, and we were having a conversation about the caste system at one point, and she was like, yeah, we got really lucky because her family came from that second highest caste, right? So that's how her father was able to be an attaché or an ambassador from India. And he was a military attaché, so he was able to do that in part because his father and his grandfather had also been of that higher caste when the caste system existed. And so, you know, now that the caste system doesn't exist, they're probably what we would all sort of consider to be upper middle class. But, you know, it's still kind of there, right? The remnants are still there, but you can move within the system now. And you used to not be able to. Before, if somebody from Let me come back this way. If somebody from this Vishaya, the merchants, if somebody from the merchants wanted to marry somebody from the Shudra, then you would actually end up moving down, which is why it very rarely happened. If the merchant's son fell in love with the farmer's daughter, then when they got married, or if they were ultimately allowed to get married, a lot of times they were not. If they did marry, they would then be considered to be Shudra caste, all of them, children included. And this is not exclusive to India. This actually happened in a lot of European countries, even as recently as about 50 to 60 years ago. Or you know what? I got an even better one. About, how old is she now? How old is Queen Elizabeth now? 80 years ago, something like that. About 80 years ago, her uncle was going to be king. Yeah? And he married an American. And basically because of this, he had to abdicate, got moved out of the line of succession, and her father, Queen Elizabeth's father, became king. Yeah, she's not even, oh, I was about right, woohoo! Yeah, because she was like 14, she was like 12, 14 when this happened. And so her father had never been expecting to be king, had never been like groomed or taught to be king. And when her uncle fell in love and married for love, gone. Yeah. So it happens. It happens in a number of communities throughout. To go, yeah. Cool. All right. Thank you, Michaelin. So that's kind of the idea behind this system, right? It's very controlling, keeping everybody in their place. I like to, you know, kind of look at what's happening today with the British royal family, and you can see that like things are shifting, right? Even recently, some of the British royals decided to leave public life, right? And everyone's like, ah! I hope she starts acting again, though. That would be cool. So, you know, there is still this sort of expectation that you stay within your group and you don't marry or move outside of your group. Yep. Yeah. And that is a big part of still what happens. A lot of marriages are still a negotiation. India actually does have, India, the Middle East, several countries around kind of in this area have arranged marriages. And arranged marriages were on purpose to unite families or to gain land or to gain property. In Europe, you would have the eldest daughter who brings the money with her dowry, marry the eldest son who brings the title. And that's the only union. So if you are an eldest daughter or an eldest son, that's what you're doing. Forget any other plans you might have had. No way, not happening, right? If you're the guy, you can take a mistress later on. If you're the girl, forget it. Because that was not okay, right? So it's a very, very controlled system. And like I said, in some places, they still do have arranged marriages. Not to say that these marriages don't work. You know, some people are perfectly happy to have that happen. Others, of course, are not. So I want to take a look at some Bharatanatyam. Did you guys get to take a look at it? Some kind of, okay. So yay, Alex. So let's look at some of the movement elements that all of these forms share. So this is a Bharatanatyam dancer that I have depicted here, but all of our forms include hand gestures, and this is for men and women. You will see more women performing certain gestures simply because they are more likely ascribed to the female character or to the female in the story. But guys do fear and disgust and anger, of course. Women more exclusively do laughter. You don't often see men doing the laughter gesture, which is actually the second one over from the left. This is laughter. Is just because it's not often ascribed to the male character. Eyes are huge. And they actually accentuate that by having black and white eyeliner. I always kind of am reminded of the eyes that we had to do for stage makeup in Martha Graham choreography. Graham was very much about sort of really popping the eyes, and it reminds me very much of kind of what we see here in Indian dance. And this is not just for the women, this is for the men too. Men use a lot of black eyeliner. Think Johnny Depp in Pirates of the Caribbean, right? It's definitely that kind of idea. Then the use of the eyes, the hands, the arms, the torso, the legs, the feet are all a big part of all of these dances. So the whole body is included in all of these dance styles. So we don't usually isolate one from the other. If I'm moving just my eyes and my head, I'm probably standing with my feet kind of turned out and my knees bent, right? So I'm already in a gesture with my legs. I may actually move and have my eyes go with my hands and then come back. So all of these things kind of go together. It feels very similar in a certain respect to ballet, forgive me, but they don't tend to move their hips independently. So unlike Middle Eastern dancing, or what we often call belly dancing, where there's a lot of isolation, the isolation that happens is more kind of sliding or turning or shifting of the head, shifting of the shoulders sometimes, but not usually like the hips moving independently. Our hips kind of go with the rest of the gesture of the body. So they're not wearing corsets, at least not until the British come. But you can definitely see that like the hips are kind of going with the gesture. Does that mean they don't do awesome back bends? Absolutely not. They do. They have great back bends that they do as part of their choreography. So that's kind of a fun part. And then character portrayal versus storytelling. So Bharatanatyam is going to be more portraying characters or just dancing for the joy of dancing, or really for the joy of celebrating the gods. And Kathak is going to be more dancing that is telling a story of some kind. So we got to look at all of these. These are all the different styles from around the world, or from around India, and I think they're really cool. And then Bharatanatyam is going to come from the south here. Kathak is going to come from the north, and if it could be still included, it would include Pakistan, right? Because the time period we're talking about actually included Pakistan too. Fun thing to note kind of here, and I think I mentioned it in the lecture too, you can see kind of the costuming. In Bharatanatyam, it's pants with a skirt that is clipped on to sort of give the folds or the illusion of a skirt on the front, but every time she turns around, you can see that it's really just pants. And then here in Kathak, it's more of a dress. And the dress usually covers at least the elbow, if not all the way to the wrist. So here's the elbow, here's the full sleeve. And up here, you'll notice she's usually always in short sleeves, sometimes even more of like a capped sleeve. as opposed to like a full sort of short sleeve, which both of these costumes kind of have. Also, my male dancer, he looks a little bit more like a traveler, right? So this looks more like a dress, as opposed to this, which is pants with a skirt kind of clipped on. This is definitely more of a dress for her, and for him, it's more of a tunic and pants kind of setup. You can also see the bells in Kathak. So one of the biggest changes between Bharatanatyam and Kathak is the use of the bells, right? Are the bells. So in Kathak, the bells are actually part of your training. You have this very, very big grouping of bells, as opposed to in Bharatanatyam, you have a smaller grouping of bells. Usually only like 3, maybe 4 rows. And here you're talking like 10 rows of bells. And what they train to do is they train to move one ligament in their foot to get 1 or 2 bells to jingle, so that when I'm telling a story, so that when I'm telling a story, I might have my mudra, my hands held in a very certain way, and I'm kind of showing you that, like, through my body language, I'm showing you that I'm anxious, but then I am actually twitching down at the bottom so that I have 1 or 2 bells that are going ding, 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 right? Which is a very sort of like nerve inducing kind of feel, right? So in order to show that my character in this story is nervous, right? She's like, I don't know, she's anticipating something, right? And she's very, very scared and she's nervous, right? I'm gonna keep my upper gesture to be what I'm conveying to the other person, but then to the audience, I'm telling them I'm nervous because I'm jingling just those couple of bells down there. So they actually add to the intensity of the performance, as well as sort of accentuating the sound of the performance. So it's a lot of fun. So let's take a look at some of these. So I think you got to, oh, and we're going to talk, for those of you who are wondering, if you were looking through your book and you're like, I don't have Bollywood, like Bollywood's not in my book. No, with each unit, I actually want to, and I like to, and I do include a contemporary form. So Bollywood actually blends a lot of these classical Indian dance forms with other forms of dance from around the world and puts it all together into what we now call Bollywood. And Bollywood itself, the name, is actually the same kind of thing. So Bollywood is actually Hollywood, and then they take the B from Bombay and they put that on instead of the H. And Bombay was actually the central location for the film industry, the rising film industry in India. And so what people would do, or what filmmakers would do, is they would see a film like Oklahoma come out in the United States. Yes, I'm picking something old because that's what they did. And they would take Oklahoma and they would put an Indian cast, an all Indian cast, and they would put, you know, the Hindu language, and they would change the story slightly so that it made sense in an Indian capacity. So as opposed to Oklahoma, now it might be Tamil Nadu, right? So it's about a state in India. But basically everything else stays the same. So we still have the same sort of love story. We still have the same songs even. Again, they're changing the language. They're changing the lyrics slightly to reflect a little bit more of their culture. And bam, it's a whole new movie, which of course it's actually not. But this is what kind of Bollywood becomes known for. And the pieces that were the most successful were these big musicals. And so even today, you can take something which is a drama like Slumdog Millionaire, and because it's a Bollywood film, the credits actually roll with a big Bollywood dance number. Does a big Bollywood dance number have anything to do with the film? No, but that doesn't matter. That's not the point. So we actually still have that as kind of part of the culture. So what I try to do is for each of the units that we're taking a look at, I always have something that is reflective of the culture now, right? So what is kind of pulling on those same cultural elements that we can see today? In our case for India, it's Bollywood. When we go to Japan and Korea, it's actually K-pop. So those of you who are K-pop fans, you're welcome. And when we look at, we've got a number of them. So anytime that we go to, you know, a different culture, I always try to make sure that there's something sort of contemporary to kind of bring us into the now and to kind of look at now. So Bollywood is our contemporary form from India, again, because it includes a lot of the classical forms and blends them together. And it's fun, and I like it. It's bright and colorful. So a couple of things, I show you these little clips at the beginning. I want to actually kind of pause us in the Bharatanatyam one if I can. There we go. So a couple of things to sort of notice here for Bharatanatyam differences. My females here do not have the skirt, right? So they are actually just dancing in pants. I do have a male involved. Males now definitely are doing Bharatanatyam. Initially, it was almost exclusively female because they were the temple dancers, right? They are giving praise to the gods and goddesses within the temples. And they were supported by the king. So I kind of want to make sure we get this idea, all right? So the temple is a Hindu temple, right? So it's to the gods and goddesses. And within the Hindu religion, gods and goddesses are kind of a bit more like people, right? They make not necessarily mistakes, but they have personality flaws, let's say. So if you know anything about sort of Greek and Roman gods, right, the pantheon of Greek gods, they get jealous of each other. They go and interact with humans. They fight each other, right? It's like Zeus is always getting at his brothers. So there's this whole kind of energy and communication that happens among the Hindu gods as well. So it's not sort of the very simplified structure that Christianity or the Muslim faith have. So it's much more, yes, yep. Zeus had all kinds of kids all over the place. And you know, that's kind of the idea, right? In our Hindu religion here that we're taking a look at too, we have gods and goddesses who leave children all over the place, and they, you know, all of these different interactions result in demigods. I don't know that anyone actually gets turned into a tree. They did in Greek mythology. So, you know, we have all of these different kinds of elements that are a part of it. And ultimately, you have the Bharatanatyam dancers. They were called the Devadasis, or the devoted, right? They're devoted to the gods. And they would dance to appease or to kind of, you know, share prayers with the gods and goddesses, right? If I am pleasing to you, then you will help the person who needs the prayers. Sorry, I looked at our chat too with the story with the fringe on top. Yeah, that's one I would love to hear that in like the Bollywood version of it, because it's already so poppy. But yeah, that's exactly what they did. So you can actually find a lot. I'm not sure how many are on YouTube because they were older, so they convert them from film. But I know they have a Bollywood version of Brigadoon, if you want to laugh. I know, right? It's so funny. For those of you who are like, I don't know what she's talking about, don't worry about it. It's crazy big Hollywood films. And yes, Norse and Celtic mythology also has drama. So I mean, not quite the same, but yeah. So yeah, our Greeks and Romans are crazy, and if you want to be entertained, like check out the Hindu mythology too. There's a lot going on. So within that sort of pantheon, the rights of the kings and the rulers to rule comes from the gods, right? I was born in to this caste so that I can be closer to nirvana, so that I am closer to being with the gods and goddesses. That's the philosophy of the caste system. So it is imperative that I, as the king, support the temple, because that's where my right to rule comes from. So the kings are giving money to the temple, and the rulers and noblemen of India are visiting the temple for prayer as well as social interaction. So my Devadasi, or my Bharatanatyam dancers, right? I am charged with dancing to kind of bring about your prayers or fulfilling your prayers, but I am also very well educated in geography, in politics, in economics, right? These are not things that were normally even taught to young men from other castes. And here I am as a female learning all of these things. Why was I taught all of these things? I was taught all of these things so that I could socially interact with the people who were coming to ask for prayers. And as a part of that, if they wanted to spend more quality time with me, I could make that decision and say yes, right? So now I am not only a companion in every sense of the word, but I'm also an advisor. So that was kind of the role of the Devadasi and the role of the Bharatanatyam dancer. So to a certain extent, if you've had any interaction or you've seen anything about it, the courtesans of Italy kind of fulfilled this same role. They were a part of the court, but they were also accessible for evening entertainment, shall we say. But they were highly educated so that they could be an active member of the court. Likewise, and we'll actually get to visit them, the geishas of Japan were similarly educated to be able to interact with members of the Japanese nobility and to actually be able to sort of fulfill that role of the advisor who doesn't want anything from you, but that was kind of the mentality of it, right? Is that if I'm interacting with another male, then we're on the same, we want the same thing, right? And I might be in conflict with him, versus if I'm interacting with a female, well, I can't be in conflict with her because she's a female, so I can listen and take her advice. Yeah. It's an interesting world, but that's kind of the idea. So my Devadasi, my Bharatanatyam dancers, very well educated because of their role at the temple. They are paid, right? But I'm getting paid and my room and board is covered. My clothing is covered because it's often the costume and the jewelry and things that I'm wearing as part of my job. My kind of needs are basically covered. So the money that I'm getting from the temple is really just a salary, like just straight up money I can do whatever I want with. Then if I have chosen to interact and been rewarded, as was often the case, sometimes with land, there were some people who would actually like donate or, you know, give land to their favorite Devadasi. And so I now am a female who owns property, and I have money, and I probably own a lot of jewelry as well, because jewelry is a very common gift, but also probably that's what I spent my money on, right, if I wanted to. So I have this very privileged role. My children, because of course there were children, the Hindu gods were not celibate, so the Devadasi are not celibate. So those children, if they were female, were actually prioritized, because they are the female, they are the child of a Devadasi, right? A high female, and they probably gained, or the thought was they gained some of my knowledge and skill. And then the father of the child is also a very high ranking person, and so they probably gained some of that person's wisdom, knowledge, skill, whatever that may be. So my female children are more likely to become Devadasi, and I can leave my property to them. My sons, they might end up becoming part of the temple. They could become, you know, priests or service members within the temple as well. But they were also just as likely, depending on the situation, not always, but depending on the situation, they could actually be adopted into the family of the father. And so then they could actually gain sort of prestige within that family as well. Because remember, this is not a child that's looked down upon. This is a child that is a very high caste child. This is not like some, you know, random kid from a prostitute, right? That was the understanding within the Hindu religion. And so the children were very, very privileged. When the British come in and they see this happening, they say, whoa, right? I can't necessarily go right in and destroy a Hindu temple, right? I want you to be Christian, but I can't just go in and completely take your religion away, right? That doesn't work. We've tried it, it doesn't work. So what we're gonna do is we're going to work our way in, and the easiest way in that they see is the Devadasi. Yay, right? Why? Because she's a female, and she's the only female in all of Indian society who can own her own property. The British didn't believe in that, right? You got married in England, all your money went to your husband owned and controlled it. And I'm a nerd. I watch all sorts of, you know, really nerdy shows and whatnot. There's a BBC show called Endeavour, and it's set in the 1960s. And even here in the 1960s, like the wife brings the checkbook out to the husband, who then signs the check, because she's not allowed to control the money at all. Like, please tell me this didn't actually happen. And they're like, oh no, it actually did. I'm like, oh my gosh. So that's the 1960s. 1960s. Okay, so done.
So basically the opening of the Jetsons then.
Yes, yep. It's like, what is going on? Yeah, totally. I mean, it's like Mad Men on steroids or something. Like, what is this? It's not okay. Sorry, done. Okay, soapbox done. So basically the British come in and they see the women or the Devadasi as the easiest way in. Plus, who is necessarily going to come defend them, right? the Raja has been supplanted by the British, right? So the Raja is a king or Raja in name only, right? The British are actually running the country. Because remember, the Indians actually rebelled and said, hey, we don't like the British have so much influence. And the British said, oh, okay, we'll just completely take over the country. So now there's no king really to sort of protect them and say, no, 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 hey, you know, we need these people to do our prayers, right? They have a very specialized role. And the British very slowly come in and they come to the new Devadasis, right? The newly initiated people who maybe haven't completely absorbed the culture yet. And they say, you know, you're in this situation. Don't you want to get married for love? Don't you want to, you know, be out on your own and, you know, be able to make your own choice and things like that? And they say, oh, well, yeah, I guess maybe I do, right? And so they leave, right? And so now they're out and we haven't quite moved them down in caste, but now we're trying to sort of, you know, get them kind of moved out, right? And then they come after kind of the middle ones, the ones who maybe were a part of the system for a while, maybe they were born into being a Devadasi and they like to dance, but they don't necessarily like, they're kind of maybe mad because they haven't been able to move up as successfully as they wanted to or something, you know, whatever. Anyone with any sort of grievance, right? It's basically kind of where they went next. And they're able to pull them out, you know, get them to leave the temple, which then really only leaves the very top, very few Devadasi. And with them, they don't even try anything else. There's now only a few of them, which means there are only a few lords who would kind of stand up for them. But again, I'm not necessarily going to be able to stand up for her because she's a Devadasi and I'm probably married, right? So within the British system, if I do anything to sort of destroy my marriage, like that's seen as really bad. So I can't like go and defend her, even though, you know, I really love probably and respect her. I can't go and protect her because then the British will take away my position or destroy, you know, whatever else I have. So they take that very top, like say 10 dancers at this one temple, right? And they completely strip them of any property that was gained from the temple, AKA everything. And because I now have nothing, they didn't officially remove my caste, but I have nothing, right? And so I am now labeled by the British for their census taking purposes as the second to lowest caste. I cannot officially be an outcast because as an outcast, if I do choose to become a prostitute, which is unfortunately what they were then labeled as, if I do choose that, I can't actually interact with a client if I'm an outcast. Doesn't work, right? Remember the selling of the pen? Yeah, that doesn't work in that situation. So I am the lowest of the castes where I'm still touchable, shall we say, but I have no access to anything. Oh, Dollhouse. Did anyone watch Dollhouse? Joss Whedon? Yeah? Okay. Yeah, okay, but you heard of it. Maybe, okay. Yes, and it's the play. And that Hendrik play is great, by the way. Well, okay, it's freaky, but it's very good. And yeah, you guys are awesome. This is gonna be such a great class. And yes, it's very much that kind of interaction and reaction and treatment too. So you guys are so cool. And then, you know, really just having this kind of toy to manipulate is really almost what it becomes. Westworld, if anyone's seen Westworld. I didn't see the most recent season. It got weird, but that's okay. I'm like that with a lot of shows. Like I watched The Walking Dead until they killed off some of my favorite characters, and then I was like, peace out. So I'm like, I can't do it anymore. So yes, it's very much that same kind of idea where we're just going to sort of slowly take things away until there's really no one to kind of fight for you, and then we'll put you where we actually think you should be. Why? Well, again, because the philosophy at the time was to try and get at the religion, right? So the religion is the issue. And the easiest way to undermine that belief system is to undermine the sort of easiest link in that, which is unfortunately the women, the Bharatanatyam dancers. So we almost lose Bharatanatyam. Bharatanatyam itself actually is kind of a reconstructed dance, because the people who had been doing it, they were training every day in the temple. They were, you know, doing performances on a regular, maybe even hourly kind of basis. You know, as much as you wanted to, you were involved in facilitating prayer. That was your goal. And so as a part of that, when that is removed, right, maybe I was one of the younger ones who left fairly early, which means that say I'm a younger one, I left fairly early, but I had inheritance from my mom, right? So I had land, I had money, I had jewelry. I leave, I find somebody and I'm like, okay, yeah, you're pretty cool. We get married. All of that, my land, my jewelry, my money, belongs to my husband. Yeah, instantly. Let's say it's like a year on, something freakish happens, he dies. Guess what? We didn't have any kids. Yeah, so it doesn't go to my son. If I'd had a daughter, it wouldn't go to her either, but we didn't have any kids. It now goes to his closest living male relative, who I may never have even met. So now all of a sudden, my money that was my mother's, remember, my land, my jewelry even, yeah, right down to my nose rings, all belongs to my husband's uncle that like I never even met. And he can do whatever the heck he wants with it. Guess what just happened to my caste also, or to my, not my caste, but my social position. Yeah, there's no one to care for me. So I am now at the same level as somebody who was, you know, hung on and hung on and hung on and then got stripped down to the lowest, second to lowest caste, right? I am now at the same point. I am now a street walker or a notch dancer as well. So I don't have a lot of time to kind of hang on to my craft, right? So that's why unfortunately we lost a lot of it. And thankfully we have some carvings and we have the Natya Shastra, right? The book, to kind of go back and put these movements together. So some of the women were actually, and men, were actually able to hang on to some of the elements of it, but a lot of it was lost. And it wasn't until the British left in 47 that we actually start to put it back together. Of course, completely removed, unfortunately, from the temples, right? So there is still sort of a prayer element to a lot of your Bharatanatyam dances. You'll see a lot of, this is namaste, or the prayer gesture. Namaste is basically like peace be with you. And so this is seen a lot in sort of the middle, often the transition points in Bharatanatyam dance. So you'll frequently have like a dance section that's just a pure dance, where I might be making gestures with my hands that do mean something, but are not necessarily a story. And then for some of us, it'll work. Think Swan Lake when the swan and the prince are falling in love, right? There's a lot of like embrace to lift you up, but there's never like a, who are you? Like we never do like that, right? We never actually like quietly interact and say, hey, so how'd you end up being a swan? Like, so talk to me here, right? It's all like, da da da, I'm lifting you up, and we're doing turns, and we're doing jumps, and we embrace, right? Okay. So I'm very dramatic, by the way, in case you couldn't tell. So basically what I'm saying is that even in our reconstructed Bharatanatyam dances, you can still see elements of the original kind of Bharatanatyam prayer dances, but they're very different now from what they would have originally been, because they are separated from the temple, right? Because I am not performing in the temple, I am not fulfilling a prayer, I am simply dancing to entertain you. It's a lot more like Swan Lake than like, say, praise dance, which you might see in a Christian church. So that's kind of the place that Bharatanatyam has now. So we don't really get to look at any Bharatanatyam yet, but we'll look at stuff. We'll look at Bharatanatyam, we'll look at Kathak, we'll look at Kathakali, and we'll look at Bollywood all next week. And we'll get to talk about some of the similarities and differences that we see in the different movement styles. The others don't have quite the same story that Bharatanatyam does, because they were not associated with religion. So my Kathak dancers get treated a very similar way. They get reduced to being called nautch dancers or street dancers because the British don't really have a place for a court performer. They never have, right? There was never really a British court performer type role. The French had that, but the French are long dead by now. Or the French kings are long dead by now. So in the time period that we're really looking at, when the British come in, the Kathak dancers are simply moved to that role because they don't have another role for them. My Kathakali performers, all male, they don't get touched because they're guys. They're also warriors, right? So the argument is that, you know, we're warriors and we get paid to be warriors, and when we're not doing our thing, we put on performances so that we still get paid. I think that'd be really cool if like the army had to like put on performances for us so that
I mean, they kind of do that.
They do. They have like the marching and the parades and things like that. But it would be fun to see stories. I don't know if they would, but it would be interesting. It'd be entertaining. I don't know. Maybe only to me. Everybody else would be like, what? But yeah, the parades and things that they do. It's true. Thoughts and questions for today? No, I did a lot of talking today. I will try not to do this in the future. Although I loved all of our comments. Those were super cool. So we'll keep elaborating on those and keep the good ideas. So these ideas, they can work into your paper too. You can include some of these things, some of these thoughts in your paper and things too. Cool. Yay. Well, we are at time. I will hang out, of course, if anyone has any questions or comments or further discussion. And for the rest of you, though, I will see you next Wednesday. Have a very safe Labor Day weekend, and I'll see you then. Thank you, guys. Oh, thank you. Yay, thank you. You're welcome. Oh, yes, thank you, Nicole. Yeah, good luck with the kids this weekend. I normally like to try and do something, and we're not gonna do anything.